Hello, everybody. This is another video. I'm going to do a little bit differently this time. Tonight, I'm going to ink because I've got some deadlines. I need to get some books done. I love doing the paints, but the books are really why I'm here. So we're going to go ahead and do a little bit of an inking demo this time. Um, I've got this page pretty well started. A number of the panels are pretty far along. But we're going to focus on one panel today. This is a very spoiler-free panel. Not a whole lot happening. It's just Ghost Frank kind of guiding Zombie Frank's hand. So he's standing behind him. Um, I think this is a pretty good one to do in a tutorial. There's a lot of different kinds of lines that we're gonna play with on this, and it doesn't give anything away. In fact, not really a whole lot on this page gives much away. But this one in particular is pretty safe. So I'm going to flip it around and show you the tools we're going to use. Okay, so this is the panel we're going to ink, by the way. So some of the tools that I use, if you see me at a convention, you will see me using this an awful lot now. This is a Pentel brush pen. This replaced this Pentel brush pen that I've had this for years. This is a really good pen. That tip, as I said, I've had this for years. Let me move this away so you can see. That's a good pen. That brush tip always stays pointy. It's wonderful. And these, well, I can't open it right now with one hand, but this takes a cartridge. So you have to buy the cartridges to replace it. This brush pen, what I love about it is that you can open the chamber. That's the tip, by the way. And you can open the chamber and refill it with traditional India ink, any brand you want. You don't have to really worry about compatibility because of the form. Then I use these Micron pens, these liner pens. I usually use an 08 for thicker lines and a 005 for fine details. This is a pen I just bought. Got it for Wizard World. Haven't had a chance to play with it too much. It's a calligraphy pen. It's got 2 tips. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. I don't know if I'm going to use this one tonight, but I will play with it and see how it works. I use a Crow Quill pen tip as well. Usually it's a Hans 102. That's an old tip. The thing is with these tips, I don't clean this one too well. The reason is because I kind of like the caked on ink. It works better for me. And the thing with these tips also is that the more you use them, the more flexible the tip gets. And I really like a tip that's just old and brittle, and there are a lot of flexibility. When it's a brand new pen, there's not a whole lot of flexibility. So I use this little bottle of ink if I'm out and about, because it's just small and I could dribble a little bit on the board and then work with that. This bottle I use to transport ink if I'm working at home or wherever. If I go to a con, I'll take this also. This used to be Black Magic ink. I have long used that. So now I just use the bottle and I fill it up with this Speedball ink. Huge bottle. This lasts me a nice amount of time. So that's the ink that I use. I don't use a traditional brush. As I said, I use the pen brush, the nibs, and the liner pens, and then I've got my little sponge here. I use them for texture. So I guess now we'll start working. Okay, so this is the panel we're going to work on. I'm going to start with this brush right here. The thing with this brush is you have to load the chamber with ink. So that means you got to squeeze it. And you see the bubbles coming out? That means that it's full. I had it loaded a little earlier, didn't use it up. So it was still full in the chamber. So the way I ink is I'll start doing just the outlines, and this panel doesn't really have a whole lot of variation in depth, but what I try to do is the the lines that are in the foreground I tend to make a little heavier. If you look up here, the panel above, Zombie Frank has a really thick line around his face and around his nose. And then if you go to the dead body in the background, it's a lot finer. It's because adding that thicker line in the foreground really makes the character jump out a lot more. It creates a lot of spatial depth. So if I had something large in the foreground, something close to the viewer, that would be very thick. This hand right here is going to have a thicker container line than Ghost Frank's head. That's just another way to create an optical illusion of depth. So right now I kind of like that line weight form. I'm going to keep doing that. One of the advantages of doing brush work is that you apply a variety of different pressure and you get thicker to thinner lines. Makes it look a little bit more natural, and that's what we're going for. I kind of bounce around. I rarely will do one figure all in one shot. I'll just kind of move around. Now, I am creating a little bit of a thicker line on Zombie Frank here, and already you can kind of see a difference. He looks like he's a little bit closer. That's what I'm going for. Now, as you can see, my pencils are extremely rough. That's because I like to do most of my thinking with the ink. I like to think that my brain works more as an inker. So I'll just kind of rough in a few shadow lines. And then I know when I ink it, I'll go in and do the polished line work that will eventually be seen in print. Plus, with the brush, I like to allow the brush to determine what happens with a line. So with the hair, what I'm doing, I will show you on the back of this. I'm creating a thick to thin line. So kind of like this, but I'm doing it in short bursts and just kind of moving around, making it look messy. So it's all thick to thin and really short. Now, one of the nice things about a brush is you can apply a lot of pressure to it and lift up. So I can do these real thick lines, but at the same time, I can do some real fine details as well. But I typically ink kind of heavy-handed. So when I'm using a brush, we'll do a lot of heavier lines. My inking starts out kind of scratchy. I gradually will go in and clean it up. Now the style of Frank is he's a lot more cartoony. If you look at my older work, like with Horseshoe or with Yuri, I think it's a little bit more realistic. But Frank is a comedy, so I tend to make him look a little bit more like a cartoon. He's got a lot more exaggerated features. Um, just his anatomy is a lot more like a cartoon character. So with Frank, I end up with a lot of heavier lines than I would typically do with more of a serious horror book. And again, I just kind of bounce around. Just doing thick to thin. Okay, so now I've got them contained. This is Zombie Frank's arm. So now I get to do the stuff that I really enjoy. I don't really care for doing the outer lines. I find those kind of dull. This is the stuff that I'm going to find the most exciting. I really like to ink clothing. I like to ink the folds on shirts. He's got this collar with the sweater. I find that actually to be pretty fun to work on. A lot of that is just flicking the brush various ways. It's all chance. I think one of the things I like about doing this part of Frank is that the brush kind of does its own thing. I like the randomness of it. So I'm not really obsessing over matching the line work in the pencils because I didn't really do that carefully to begin with, because I knew I would come in and while inking it I was just going to be a little more free. And I rarely ever pay attention to mistakes. I'm doing this pretty quickly because I know whatever mistakes I make, I'm gonna break a line here and there, like I did on the thumb. But I just bring the line in a little further, and you never know. Um, it's all recoverable. That's one of the joys of inking your own work. I don't have to worry about a penciler saying, "Hey, this looks different." I've never had my work inked by anybody else. I think it'd be kind of weird to see what somebody else does with it. Now I'm just starting with a thin line, applying pressure as I pull it back. The thing with inking with a brush is all you do is pull. I've heard many other inkers say this, so we'll all agree. You rarely ever push a brush because you're not going to get the desired effects. I mean, you could do it for special effects you're trying to achieve, but for the most part, you're not going to have as much control as if you just pull the brush. So I pull it. And again, a lot of it is just really, really quick little bursts. It's more fun that way. So a lot of these folds, I didn't really work those out in the pencils. I let the brush tell me where those folds were going to be. It's just pull, pull, pull. If I tried to push, I'll do that. Oh, I can't do it right there. I'll do that when it's dry. So you can see what happens. Okay, so I'm going to work on his eyes now. Zombie Frank is a lot of fun to work on. He's a lot of fun to ink because, as you can see up here, you can go in and create all this texture, the rotted flesh, all this line work creates different values. It creates different directions of the way the skin is starting to rot. You can just create all kinds of different little crevices that way. So zombies are a lot of fun to ink. Now, if you follow the Frank book, you'll notice that he's evolved. His face has deteriorated more and more. His eyes have gotten bigger and bigger to the point where now it's the shape of the eye socket. The whole eyeball is exposed. So at some point, I might actually take the eyes out, just let them fall, because that really would be the next progression, I would imagine. Now again, with his face, I didn't go and create a whole lot of permanent line work because I'm going in and really letting the brush tell me what it's going to look like. Add a little bit of blood. Now the blood, I just jiggle the brush around. And if you look really close, that tip is really, really fine. So I can go in there and just kind of move it around. The brush itself, the bristles aren't bending too much. It's just that little fine tip. And when I put all this blood around Frank's mouth, that contrast around the mouth itself just makes it stand out. In comics, well, in black and white artwork, it's all you have is value contrast to work with. So the more contrast I have, obviously the more it's going to pop out. So adding all of that blood makes the mouth far more prominent. I do the same with the eyes. I make his eyes look like they're rotting, or just rotting away, and it makes the eyes pop out even further. So Zombie Frank is basically rotted eyes and rotted mouth with blood, and it works. Now the lines that I'm putting here by this chin, I'm looking at his chin kind of goes into his cheek. He's got these saggy cheeks. So I'm adding this line here because it's creating a little bit of a shadow where that droopy cheek is coming down. And I'm going to do a little bit of, actually I'm going to use my micron on this. And just add a few more lines that you really have to look closely to actually see the line work. But overall it creates additional value. Makes it look like there's more work in there than there really is. And all of these lines are just making him pop out even further. Just little dots here and there. Because he's decomposing, so he's just going to have breaks in his flesh. Yeah, I think there's quite a bit of detail in his face. He's got to have some teeth. So again, Frank is kind of a cartoon, so I don't go in and render all of his teeth. If I did also, if I rendered all of that really tightly, it would just blend in with all of this line work here. So if I just imply the edges around the gums and then do just a little bit of a line, it shows his teeth. That's all I need, really. Um, I'll use a liner pen and just do a little bit more line work. This sweater's got this V-neck collar. His shirt, just like his face, is falling apart. Now this I would probably grab my line or my brush pen, but I'm just gonna ink it with this. Now because he's a zombie, his fingernails aren't going to be very clean. They're not manicured, so I don't take a whole lot of care into making sure that the fingernails look presentable. It's not a hand model. So I really just bounce around from pen to pen. Add that shadow over the hand. Makes the hand pop out a lot more. So for his decayed stomach, I'm going to go in with the line, with the liner pen, and just kind of create these parallel lines. This kind of implies that there are guts in there. There. I don't really have to go into a whole lot of detail showing everything because there's not really a whole lot of window space there. I'm just implying. He's got all of these rips in his shirt. He needs a new shirt. Okay, I think Zombie Frank is done. So now I'm going to work on Ghost Frank a little bit more. Now, when I came up with Ghost Frank, originally my plan was I was going to try and draw him transparent. I really wanted people to know he was a ghost. So I would draw all of the elements in the background through him. It just got to be such a mess. I thought when I ink this, it's going to be such a mess of lines. Nobody's going to be able to tell what this is. So I decided I'll ink him normal, like he's a living a living being. And when I scan the pages in, I'll just screen him back and he'll be printed in grays. And that seemed to work. And again, it's a cartoon. So his expressions tend to be a little bit more cartoony than I would typically draw. I'm going to go back to the brush. Every now and then I have to reform the brush. So that's what I was doing. I usually I'll just pick a black shape, just go in there and turn the brush, gets it back into a nice, real narrow shape. So I can get these nice fluid lines again. Then I have to make sure I don't put my hand in the wet ink. That's one of the benefits with this pen as opposed to this pen. These ink cartridges, they I don't know what ink they use on these. The lines go down really nice on the board, but the ink doesn't dry very fast. So I have to be very conscious. If I'm working with that brush, I'll work on something here and then I have to work over here and then maybe down here, because then it'll give this time to dry, and then when I'm done with this and I move over here, I have to be very aware of where I'm working and where that is in the drying time. So the ink I put in this brush dries pretty quickly. So I when I was working on this shape here, I was going to demonstrate what happens when you push the pen or push the brush. So I'm going to do that right here. So it just kind of splits. I mean, it's not bad. You get some nice effects, but that isn't really my style of inking. It's more of a David Mazzucchelli style of inking, which I love his work, but my brain doesn't work like his. So that, while I would love to be able to ink like that, it just doesn't seem natural to me. I typically do a lot of line work, and I like a lot of these little breaks. So I typically will just do a pull. So again, I'm creating a lot of contrast between this shape and this shape. Because that's what pulls the image out. All the characters, it's you need a contrast to be able to see what's going on. Okay, so this shape wasn't penciled to be a solid shadow, but I needed something to move this arm out. If I kept that in there, it would have blended in. You wouldn't really be able to tell what was going on. So I go back to my liner pen. And then I'll just feather this a little bit. So that's what these lines are. Didn't really give it a term, but that's just feathering. Doing a sequence of lines to imply shadow and usually leading into a darker shape. And that's already dry. And I'm just feathering a little bit more. All right, I think that's about it. I'm pretty happy with that panel. I'm not gonna put any filler in there because there's gonna be some word balloons that'll cover that up anyway. But that's it. That's inking for tonight. So thank you for watching, and I think maybe tomorrow we might do a Supergirl painting. All right. Talk to you later. Bye.